growing up, you wanted to eventually create your own video game, right?
Yeah.
Is that still like a pursuit that you've explored to this day, or is that something you've kind of left on the curbside?
That is still something I want to do. Nowadays, I have a better understanding of how games are made, and there are different parts of the game design process that I like, and there are parts
Sure.
where like I never want to touch that part of the process. So, for example, video games rely on code and programming, and
I was going to ask. I was like, is coding the one you don't want to touch?
Yeah, I do not like programming. I know the basics of it. If I look at someone else's code, I might not be able to fix it, but I can look at parts and say, oh, this probably controls this part. This probably controls this part. I can look at the big webs of all these files linked together and be like, okay, that does this, this does that.
The general logic is what you have down.
Exactly. But to do all that from scratch, the most impressive thing I've done besides like using default tools and game programs like Unity is like a text-based number guessing game. And it would keep track of how many times you guessed, and it would insult you based on how many times you got stuff wrong. That's about the furthest of my knowledge, and it taught me that I do not like coding, I do not like programming. I would rather just save up a bunch of money and just pay someone to do it. But the artsy side of it, the idea of like designing a level and using game design knowledge to like teach a player how to play without having a tutorial, the idea of like having these different aesthetics for courses that like aren't just floating blocks all over the place, but are like incorporated into the design.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I like. So it's hard to land a position like that in the game industry because that's what a lot of people want to do. So you got to have like an art designer's portfolio and stuff. So my main workaround to trying to make my dream game one day, well, I was supposed to do this year, but because of the pandemic and everything happening last year, a lot of my plans got pushed back. But I was going to make a proof of concept. I was going to make an entire animation of my game. It would basically look like the game, like someone was playing it, but the truth of the matter was it wasn't a program that someone was playing, it was just entirely animated. And I was going to make that and try to pitch it to someone and try to save up money. I actually attempted to go on some game shows and win money that way, and that was just going to help fund my game if I won on the game shows.
No kidding.
Yeah. I auditioned for The Chase. I was not accepted. So I that was my idea, was just to try and at the very least have something, because I don't quite have an elevator pitch yet. You know, if the time comes where someone's like, all right, what's the game you want to make? I'd be like, we need to have like a conversation, because my game isn't just, I want to make something like Sonic, or I want to make something like Mega Man. It's not quite that. I need to show you rather than tell you.
Yeah.
So I still have an idea for a game. It's in there. I have all these ways that I think it could be fun, and I can't wait to see like a Let's Player's reaction to some of the stuff, and I will make it one day. It might not be within the next 5 years, it might not be within the next 10 years, but I will make it, and I can only hope that people like it, because my other biggest nightmare is making it, and nobody likes it. You know, I don't want to. I don't want to be the next Mighty Number 9 or Bow in Wonderworld, and I feel bad to say stuff like that, but I don't want to be like that. I want to be more like Shovel Knight or Undertale or something like that.
Absolutely. And so would you say there's kind of a magnum opus of a game that you're building in your head? Like, is it one specific idea that you kind of think would shine above others, or are you more collecting separate ideas that can be applied to multiple games, would you say?
As weird as it is to answer this question, it is a bit of column A, column B, because the game I want to make, I know exactly how I want it to look and play and feel, but at the same time, this won't make sense until the game actually comes out 10 years from now. It's technically 2 games in one. It's technically you play as one character and the game's kind of like a side scroller, and then you play as another character and the game's more like an exploratory RPG. So I have different ideas that fall into each category. But eventually when I do make this proof of concept, it'll be like, all right, now I'm gathering feedback and ideas to help like expand upon this type of gameplay.
So you have a general like genre in your head that you want to go through with.
That's correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that you're interested in like the game mechanics and the design or whatnot. Are you also, you mentioned also that you animate though. Are you fascinated at all by animating in the video game, by visually designing it at all? Or
I love animation. In layman's terms, I know how animation works, both 2D and 3D. It's not my passion to be an animator, but in my own video projects, like I've done some very, very basic animation, and I can I can manipulate certain objects and animate it myself to do edits and stuff, but I don't aspire to animate to go to work every day and draw pictures every day to make it look like a character's waving their hand, or in a 3D animator's case, motion tweening a hand all day to make it look like they're waving. And it takes a while, and I respect the craft, and I love going to museums, and I love seeing behind the scenes documentations on how all of this stuff is done. But I basically want to have the seat of a game director, but I really don't want to have to get into the nitty gritty of doing specifics for every part of the project. I kind of want to have Miyamoto's position where it's like, here's the idea, let me draw it for you. Can you do this? That's kind of what I want. But I realize, I think everyone wants the position where you just tell other people what to do and they make it for you.
I mean, if they're offering, I'll take it.
Sure, you know? Sure. So that's why I need the proof of concept, so I can be like, can we make this? Because as soon as I have something to show or convey, then it's more possible.
And do you have any plans to work on other people's games in kind of preparation for that? Like, would you be okay with working on someone else's craft, or do you kind of feel like you have to see this vision through first, basically?
I mean, I'm interested in making other people's projects. I am a little selfish in the sense that I feel as though a lot of people will say they want to make a game, but they don't have a clear idea of what they want to make. And I'm going to try not to sound super mean with this, but a lot of people, when they say they want to make a game, this isn't everybody, but a lot of people, when they say they want to make a game, the first thing they describe is the plot and the story. They're like, all right, I want to make this futuristic game with a character who has to save this princess from this place. And it's like, okay, well, it sounds like you have the idea for a story and not so much a game. And then when they say what their game is, they say, oh, it's like Zelda. It's like Kirby. It's like Bomberman. It's like, it makes me cringe a little bit, because if I were an investor and someone came in to do their pitch, that's not how I'd want someone to sell their game to me. And that's why I often feel bad for people who do try to make these games. They look really, really cool, but nobody picks them up because they're not the next big Mario or the next big Zelda or the next big Pokemon or whatever.
Right.
So I don't want to badmouth independent developers. I know it's tough. I know it's tricky.
Right, sure.
But
and there's definitely no shame in having a good idea for a good story, right?
Yeah.
It's just you don't want to diminish everything else in a game to its story concept alone.
Exactly.
Basically.
So that's kind of my point. Is a lot of people, they focus so hard on the story, and while that can be okay, it deters me away. There are a lot of people who want to make a game, but it becomes more obvious that if I was like, okay, let's make it, they would not have a clear idea of like what the roadmap is to making that game. I, for as selfish as it sounds, feel like I do have a little bit more of a roadmap. And I admit, you know, if an investor showed up tomorrow and said, here's $1 million, make your game, I'd be like, okay, I have to figure out a lot of stuff.
Sure.
But at least I would go about making a game design document. I would go about literally making a roadmap document to show people like, this is what we make first. And I would start knowing like the types of people I'd want to hire, but I don't know at what point I would hit a roadblock and be like, oh, I wasn't expecting this. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, right. So I mean, it's so hard to predict absolutely everything in your head, but it sounds like if you have enough to make a roadmap, it's you at least have a feel of a game inside your head, as opposed to like, boy, a sci-fi game where you're a pirate would be really cool.
Right. So
and I feel like you see some games that are made based off of these bizarre story concepts. Well, not bizarre, but off of these story concepts without a game plan of like how it's actually going to function in mind first. And I think that might be how you get certain games that feel almost unpolished or buggy or have genre problems where they don't understand what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So I think being cautious about that is a good thing. But like you said, there is definitely still value to having a really good story concept, basically.
For sure. But yeah, just to like give you the TLDR of your question, I would be interested in working on someone else's game. I think it's kind of like what I do for editing. Editing for someone else helps me better edit my own stuff. I see it as only a good thing. And even if it turns out to be a terrible experience, at least I'll have the knowledge like, okay, now I know what not to do. But it's not something I'd want to do forever, and I would be very picky about like who I would and would not want to design a game for. I don't even know what I contribute. My game design knowledge is so limited. I don't know that I would even seek a specific position. But if someone's offering, they're like, "Do you want to do this?" I'd probably say maybe.
Hey there. You just watched a clip from my creative podcast. If you'd like to check out the full episode as well as other episodes as soon as they come out, you can support me over on Patreon for the $3 tier, or you can just subscribe here and wait for clips and podcast episodes to come out eventually.